Hello, Grace Community Church. Pastor Steve here, continuing our journey cover to cover through the Bible. Today is August 6th, and some very interesting passages. In fact, one of these passages contains a very important verse in my own journey in life. We're looking at Jeremiah chapter 19 and 20, and then we move to a surprising book, one that has a lot of interesting stories and prophecies, and that is the book of Daniel. Just doing chapter 1. Now, when we look at Jeremiah, we see in Jeremiah chapter 19 how bad things are in terms of Israel. We're under a reign of an evil king who is really a vassal of, at one point, Egypt, another point, Babylon. But what happens is we see the beginning of the end. And what is the condition? Well, the people are worshiping Baal or Baal, B-A-A-L. And in this process, they're even sacrificing the children. Now, God gives Jeremiah a very interesting instruction. He says, I want you to go to the potter's house. I want you to pick up a clay jar, and I want you to smash it in front of all the people, the leaders, and in doing so, you will be expressing what God is going to do to your kingdom. Now, very, very powerful imagery and something to take note. We see this in the prophetic works where there is a dramatization of what God is going to do. I actually apply this in a lot of my preaching. I believe in using props. I believe in using things that can make a message hit home. And I get this from the prophets. But then we move to this very difficult passage in the sense of chapter 20. Jeremiah begins by giving this, very fervent prophetic word against Judah. And in doing so, they come against him. They want to imprison him. Jeremiah gets punished. He gets thrown into a cistern. All these bad things happen to Jeremiah. But ultimately, Jeremiah stands firm. But then, if you notice in your Bible, it says Jeremiah's complaint. This is one of the most honest prayers in the Bible. Jeremiah says, all you give me is doom and gloom to prophesy, and I've had it up to here. But now comes verse 9, which for me is one of the most powerful verses for a preacher. He says, but if I say I will not mention him or speak any more in his name, his word is in my heart like a fire shut up in my bones. I am weary of holding it in. Indeed, I cannot. That is, I think, the strength of a great preacher. That what you're saying is a fire in your heart that must be released. And then Jeremiah, throughout the rest of the chapter, kind of ebbs and flows to confidence, the Lord is with me like a dread warrior, verse 11, to back to discouragement, and then he gives a word of praise and back to discouragement. And isn't that the nature of our lives? Jeremiah is a human being, and he tells us that you can be honest in your prayer life with the Lord. Now, we move then to Daniel chapter 1, and this is where I want to give you some insight. In terms of Judah and the exile in Babylon, it really shows up in three ways. The first is 605 BC. Now, what's happening 605 BC? This is when Nebuchadnezzar comes in and takes the cream of Israel. These are where all the Harvard, Yale, Princeton educated leaders are taken back. And thus begins the story of Daniel and the exile in Babylon. They're brilliant people. And Nebuchadnezzar, to his credit, recognizes their brilliance. And this is where we get the famous Daniel diet that is mentioned in terms of let's eat vegetables. The primary reason for this diet was not to be a vegetarian. That's not it at all. It was because it's all about being kosher. See, veggies are kosher, but the meats that they would offer them to eat would not be kosher. Kosher meaning the meats prescribed in the law. And so the goal of the Daniel diet was not to have a wonderful figure. the goal of the Daniel diet was to honor God's law, thus the vegetables. But here's where I want to give you a framework, because the city state of Jerusalem, Judah, is still going on. It's just that the cream was taken away. But then you move to approximately 597 BC, and at this point, there is another large group of people brought into exile into Babylon. But there's going to be one more visit, and that is in 586 BC. And this is where you see the destruction of the temple. This is Solomon's temple being completely destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. And it comes down to the kings, the last few kings of Judah. They're seeking to push back against Nebuchadnezzar, but God doesn't protect them because they're living corrupt and evil lives. And so basically, this is the way that it all began. And it's going to end, one more date for you, in 539 BC. This is when King Cyrus will come about. And right about a year or two after this, that's when he releases the exiles to go back to the promised land. So this gives you a framework on how these things fall into place. Interesting stuff, great verse. And if I would say, learn one major thing, be like Jeremiah, speak honestly with God, even if what you have to say is hard to say. Hey, God bless you. We'll see you tomorrow.